Hi, and welcome to Let's Chat at the Candy Factory, live at the Candy Factory. I am Ann Kirby, your host, and I'd like to welcome John Walker of J. Walker Marketing to the show today. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Ann. I appreciate you having me. It's great to be here.
Excellent. Well, we have an interesting topic that's very relevant today because the Facebook boycott started today. So we'll be chatting a little bit about Facebook, the boycott, and an article that sparked the conversation between you and I about having you on the show, which was that you wrote back on June 9th called "It's Hard to Feel Good About Facebook These Days." So I'm excited to explore this topic more with you. Tell me a little bit about yourself, John.
Sure. Yeah. So I work as a marketing consultant. I've worked in marketing and advertising my whole career. And right now I work with business owners and marketing teams to help them succeed at marketing. I focus on digital marketing. That includes social media marketing. And I work as a consultant to marketing teams. And the reason I'm particularly interested in Facebook is I'm often talking to business owners and marketing directors about where to place advertising. So This is a very pertinent conversation.
Yeah, so thank you for being here and for bringing your expertise to the table. I just want to encourage anybody watching, please give us your comments if you have any questions for John or myself during the show, or tell us what you think about the Facebook boycott and also just how you feel about Facebook in general. So we'll dive right into that. John, you wrote this article. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on Facebook and
Sure.
why you chose personally to step back from Facebook.
Sure. Well, I've used Facebook for a long time, starting in probably 2007.
Oh, same here, 2007.
Yeah, and back then, if you remember,
that's like 12 years.
Yeah, it's a long time. I mean,
long time.
I've spent a lot of time in there, and as you remember, and many listeners today remember, it was a platform for really interpersonal connections. It wasn't so much an advertising platform. You were trying to get likes, you were connecting with old friends, you were finding people that you hadn't talked to in a long time. It was great fun.
Great. It was great.
Yeah, it was amazing. And it started then to kind of turn into a marketing platform. And I remember using it for sweepstakes and, photo contests and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And again, it was amazing. Then in 2012, they went public and the whole kind of organic reach really started to drop. So it changed as a marketing platform. It turned from a place where it was all about building a big audience for yourself or your brand to really using it as a marketing platform, a paid advertising platform. And it was amazing at that. And it really still is amazing at that in terms of targeting, because you've got all this personal information on there that's used for ad targeting.
Yeah.
So if I say that I like being around my dog, I may start seeing some ads talking about dog food.
Definitely. It's in one way that's, it's a good and bad thing. It's good for those of us who run campaigns for clients. And then the consumer side, though, it does sometimes feel a little icky. So you kind of mentioned that, like emotionally, not necessarily being good for your mental health.
Yeah. Well, okay. So part of this discussion is going to kind of split into personal stuff and professional stuff. So now we're in the personal stuff.
Exactly.
So I just started feeling not so good about sharing all this stuff. And I started, I've connected with people from high school. I started seeing their vacation pictures and I'm thinking, I have not seen these people in decades. Why am I seeing their vacation pictures? It feels like I'm creeping on them. And then I'm thinking, why do they want to see my vacation pictures or pictures of my family who they've never even met?
Yeah.
So that was part of it. The other part was that I found it to be really distracting. I would post something and then I'd find myself checking back. Oh, did anyone see that? Did anyone share that? And that just felt kind of bad. It sort of kept pulling me out of the present moment. And it just felt like it wasn't good for my mental health.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I find that I have, over the last few years, been slowly reducing my time on Facebook, and more so now in the last year or so than ever before, in part because you get on there for maybe a very specific reason to check something or check in, or, I'm part of a lot of different groups that I find very
Hmm.
valuable on Facebook. But then you go down this rabbit hole of,
Yeah,
oh, well, this is interesting. Well, this is interesting.
right,
Sometimes, good thing, sometimes bad thing, you see, and it really does start to impact mental health, I think, but also
right.
just the amount of proactive time that you could be using for more productive tasks or work, or even
Sure.
relaxation. So on a personal note, I'm there with you. So how does that translate on the business side? You as a marketer, someone who's working with clients to build awareness, sell products, those kind of things, who use Facebook for advertising. How have you balanced that kind of ickiness of Facebook, and how
Sure.
do you make that work for your clients, and or what are your thoughts around that?
Well, the first thing I've been talking to clients a lot about is that the practices that they used on Facebook when it was more of an organic platform need to change. And that the organic reach of content on Facebook is now so low. I mean, I think they say that under 5% of folks that you're connected with are going to see your content if you post it organically.
Mm,
So the idea that it's kind of this really low cost organic news building platform is not, it doesn't really work that way so well anymore.
right.
So number one, I've been talking about the fact that it's a paid platform.
Yeah.
Number two, I've been talking about whether it's worth the effort based on who your target audience is. So if you're a B2B organization and you have a brand page on Facebook, is that really the best place for your content? It used to, people think of Facebook as being all encompassing, and there's the argument, well, 1.9 billion people are on there, so everybody's on there, so our brand needs to be on there. But
Right.
if you're selling ceiling tiles to a trade audience, you probably don't need to be on there.
Right. I do marketing for a lot of B2B companies, and we have found that Facebook is just, not the place that they need to be spending a lot of their energy. Um, Everyone has to kind of make that assessment, like, where is that energy better spent? Maybe that's a different platform, or different advertising channels.
Well, and related to that, Anne, a conversation that I often have when I'm talking particularly small businesses is their first effort in marketing is usually around social media. So if they're doing nothing else, they're doing social media. And a lot of times, not only are they doing social media, but they're hiring at least one person to do social media for them.
Right.
So that means that they've already spent, $40,000-$50,000 on salary for someone to do social media. And if that platform isn't working extremely well for them, that's a sunk cost that
Mm-hmm.
they need to seriously consider. So another conversation that I have is, okay, is social media the best platform for you, knowing that you're probably not going to get that sort of viral reach that I think we all used to hope that we would get? And where are you best spending your time and resources?
Right. And so, someone who's been in marketing for a while, um, are you exploring some of those tools that maybe have been neglected for a while? I know that there's kind of been a resurgence in some mail marketing, things like
Yeah.
that.
Well, I think that I don't go in with any presupposition about where the best platforms are. So I talked to someone in the senior living industry recently, and I said, if you could only do one marketing tactic, what would it be? And they said direct mail.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I'm saying that knowing that folks, not only decision makers, but even people that are going into a senior living community today, I'm not saying that they're not online. They are
Right.
absolutely online.
Totally.
They've
Yeah.
been online for a long time. And so it's not that they're not online. It's just that it happens to be, for whatever reason, a decision and an audience where direct mail works really well. So if that works well, use that. Another example is email marketing. So I think we've all been waiting for a long time for email marketing to die.
Yeah, it's not going anywhere anytime soon.
But it's not. And a well-built, carefully filtered email marketing list that a brand develops for itself is very, very effective. So email marketing is another platform that I never presume should not be considered.
Well, and you make a good point with email. We actually surveyed Candy Factory members to kind of say, hey, what platforms are you comfortable on? Where do you get your information, especially when it comes to products that you want to buy? And a good handful of them were like, email is where I get that information. I can filter it, I can control it. I'm getting, you get discounts, you get coupons, things like that. Versus social media, where a lot of our members are choosing to, again, reduce their time. So we just have a couple comments. I just want to get to them real quick. So Scott, welcome, and welcome everyone who's watching. Scott says that he agrees with you, John, that he went through a purge of his friends a few years ago, and that it's been a great way to kind of keep connected with family that he doesn't see as frequently anymore. So cleaning that list really helped. And you said in your article that you did actually reduce the amount of people that were part of that network.
I did. I've done this with both Facebook and Twitter. At one point, I deleted both my Facebook account and then I started it up again. I did the same with Twitter. And in the world of Twitter, it's funny because I went from having quite a large following to having a very small following, and I can't seem to build it up again. I think maybe the conditions have changed and it's harder to build a following, or maybe it's just more crowded. But yes, I did that because I hadn't been very discerning about who I was following and who I was connected with on either of those platforms. And I didn't know a lot of people. I didn't know them well, and I didn't want to do that anymore.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting because rebuilding these networks that you had built when we were on there in 2007 to 2012 now is very challenging.
Yes.
And like you said, it's just the organic reach in general is really hard. So Scott had said, John, are there 2 to 3 specific industries or 2 to 3 specific types of initiatives that you think Facebook is a good channel for? Like, what businesses tend to thrive the most on Facebook?
Small local consumer businesses absolutely thrive. I'll give you an example. A chiropractor, a massage therapist. Those are great businesses for Facebook. They rely on word of mouth. They rely on local targeting. It's a direct response medium. It's a good medium for, say, delivering a special deal or a coupon. So those types of small businesses on Facebook work very well.
Yeah, I would agree. And before we dive into the boycott topic, Facebook groups obviously has become an incredibly popular initiative. A lot of people will join groups based on specific topics that they're interested in. I, for example, run a Facebook group page for kick-ass female entrepreneurs throughout the region, and it's a really active group. I'm also part of a Women of Co-working group. I'm also part of a Co-working Content Alliance group. Really valuable information, but I know that those of us who run groups are looking at all their alternatives for these groups. And I'm actually looking at moving the Kick-Ass group to the Mighty Networks platform, which is a platform that we can control. Okay. And they don't then have all of the noise and distraction of Facebook. So I think that's part of the challenge, is the noise and distraction that Facebook creates. Have you heard of any other platforms that that people are migrating to?
I don't know a lot about that, but what I will say is that it's sort of a two-edged sword, because everybody's been on Facebook. So everybody that you wanted in those groups, it has been on Facebook. Now, whether they're using it as often as they used to, maybe they're not. But I'm sure it was very convenient, because here's a platform, everybody's on it, and everybody's using it probably almost daily.
So it's easy to check while you're there.
That's right. Yeah. So the reach and convenience and scale of Facebook is a huge advantage. When you move to another platform, you're going to lose that convenience. You're going to lose that visibility. But like you said, you're also going to separate the users of that from the distraction and the noise and kind of the chaos of Facebook. So that's something that may increasingly happen. And we might cover that a little bit when we talk about advertising as well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that what we're finding with the transition to this new network is that you're not going to have as large numbers, but the goal is that you have quality over quantity.
Yes.
You have those that really want to engage and be part of it, versus just someone who's looking at that group page as an opportunity to market or solicit or those kind of things.
Sure.
So that has been the plus and minus, because if you really care about the numbers, I actually think it's the quality over those numbers. I just want to get to some of the comments here. Some cool cushions at the candy factory, yes. So John, that was Scott's. John are 2 or 3 specific industries. We also have another comment on LinkedIn for B2B in today's SM mix. I'm not sure what the question there. I don't know, John, if you can decipher that. Chris also said that the Fair Trade Federation refuses to use Facebook groups because of information ownership and privacy. So privacy is a real concern, obviously, on Facebook. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, a lot of thoughts on that. It's interesting when you dive into how Facebook treats privacy. And the short story is that they don't safeguard privacy at all, and they don't make any effort to. And the reason Facebook exists to some degree is anti-privacy. It's about connections, it's about sharing. And it's the polar opposite of what you have come to expect, say, from a website's privacy policy. So when you read a website's privacy policy, and every reputable website has one, it will say, we don't do this, we don't do that, we safeguard this. Facebook doesn't have a privacy policy. They have something called a data policy. And when you read that, it basically says, we share this, we share that, this is not private, this is going to be used X, Y, and Z different ways. So it's very unsettling for anyone who's concerned about privacy to kind of dig into the way Facebook works. And this was really revealed, if those of you who were tracking this Cambridge Analytica scandal in 2018. And that was a situation where people's privacy was basically violated without their knowledge. Now, what's interesting about that is that, so a research company had people on Facebook fill out detailed surveys, which provided information about their attitudes, likes, dislikes, and sort of mindsets. And what Cambridge Analytica did was they then correlated those mindsets with demographic kind of targeting related information. And they used that for political advertising.
Right.
And not only that, but they then created lookalike audiences. So they built audiences from those that had filled that out, combined with friends and connections of those that had filled that out.
Sure.
So what's interesting about that in my mind is not that happened, because those were basically features that Facebook had been marketing to advertisers. They had been marketing this idea of lookalike audiences. They had been promoting the idea that you can target with that sort of specificity.
Right.
The reason it was a scandal is because the public found out about it. And it was one of the first instances when the public said, oh, wait a minute, that's what Facebook is doing?
Right.
It wasn't that it had sort of violated Facebook's policies per se. It was that the consumers found out about it and they didn't like it.
Right. Right. Yeah, Cambridge Analytica, it's a really interesting story. And there's a great documentary that if you want to learn more information about, it's worth watching, just to kind of understand what is happening with your data,
Yes.
and how it's being used to manipulate as well, which is where it starts to get really tricky on the marketing front, because marketers using that for campaigns on Facebook and other, platforms, social media platforms, are benefiting from that data.
Yes.
But there's also the moral questions behind it. And so that definitely is challenging. So Chris was saying data is incredibly valuable, and most people don't understand the power that they have with their data. And there's even been, conversations, some countries, you own your data, right? So technically, like, you could say, I want to know what data you have on me. You should be able to understand how it's being used. We should be able to own our data. And that's definitely that's another topic. Obviously, you could dive into data and privacy.
And Europe is going in the opposite direction that we've been going in with their global data protection policies. And when you visit websites that are so explicit, saying, this website has cookies, that's a function of the global data protection legislation that was passed in the European Union to safeguard data. Because in Europe, there is this belief that people should own their data, and that organizations that collect information on users have to be very explicit about the fact that they're doing that.
Right.
Facebook doesn't do that, clearly.
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so the thing about privacy is really interesting, because this data policy, Facebook wouldn't work if they safeguarded privacy the way more and more people are starting to want them to. So they wouldn't be able to target the way they do today, and that's one of the cruxes of this issue with Facebook.
So speaking to that, I know that Stop Hate for Profit Boycott wants real change, right? Wants Facebook to actually look at the platform, look at how misinformation, hate speech, things like that. And I think privacy is part of that conversation as well. Taking a look at their current stance and making some changes. And so we've seen the boycott, which launched today, correct?
Correct. July 1.
July 1, just for the month of July, correct?
That's what Stop Hate for Profit is asking for. But is it going to stop the end of July? I don't know.
Well, it's interesting. So for those who don't know what Stop Hate for Profit is, can you give us a little bit of information on that?
Stop Hate for Profit is an organization that has a number of different members, including the NAACP, the Anti-Defamation League, and others, sort of civil rights oriented organizations. And they have been disturbed by what they see as a lot of messaging that incites violence, hate-oriented messaging, and those types of both organic content and advertising content on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And so they've come together with this movement, the Stop Hate for Profit movement, and said to advertisers, you should boycott this platform for the month of July. And the boycott is gaining steam. It's gaining momentum. So major advertisers have signed on. Unilever, Verizon, North Face, Hershey's, Coca-Cola. These are some of the largest advertisers in the world.
Yes, Starbucks just announced this past weekend, and they are the 6th largest advertiser on the Facebook platform. So that's a huge blow.
It is a huge blow. It's a huge blow from a public relations standpoint. Now, to be clear, it's not a huge blow from an economic standpoint, because Facebook has over 7 million advertisers. And to put it in perspective, Facebook has over $6 billion a month in revenue. Right. I think that there's a statistic that says that if all of these major brand advertisers took their dollars away from the platform, Facebook would retain 90% of its revenue.
Right.
So these brand advertisers make up a small percentage of the Facebook revenue. Most of it is made up by the chiropractors, the small businesses, the individuals who have discovered Facebook as a great marketing platform for them.
Right. So the goal would be that these big brands can make a statement, can build awareness, and then small businesses can potentially follow suit in the boycott.
That's right. And the other factor, the other effect that this is having is that it is dealing a blow to Facebook's stock price.
Yes.
In June, the Facebook stock price has fallen 10%, which is gigantic.
I know. My note here is that $56 billion off of their market value just in the last few weeks. That does hurt. That starts to hurt the bottom line a little bit to get Facebook to shift a little bit. And I know they announced some changes, but again, these brands are like, these changes are not enough.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's happening is that because Facebook is so big, 1.8 or 9 billion users.
Yeah, with 3 billion globally in all their products, I believe, like WhatsApp.
That's
and
right.
Yep.
Exactly. So absolutely massive scale. So the reality with that type of scale is that they are representative of society as a whole. And as we all know, our society is very polarized. Right. So they're so big that Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO, and the leadership, they have been trying to walk down the middle. They have been trying to appease all sides. What's interesting about this is that Facebook has very clearly articulated standards for the type of content that can and cannot be on their platform. They explicitly say that they will not allow content that promotes violence and other types of sort of hateful content like that. But because the platform is so big, they can't realistically enforce it, though they do try. They make, I think some would argue they aren't making that much of an effort. But for example, they have thousands of moderators who manually comb through their content every day, but it's not enough. Right. The other factor is that they have explicitly made exceptions for political messaging. So they do allow hate speech. They do allow very polarizing, sort of violent messaging from the political class, because they say this is messaging that you don't want us to hide from you. Which that argument doesn't wash for me, because they're trying to hide lots of other content, and I commend them for that. They're trying to hide the worst sort of violent content, and they're trying to cleanse their platform in other places, but they're not making an effort to do it there. And I think that's because they're trying to not create a firestorm. Right,
not rock the boat. When Twitter started censoring content more aggressively, Zuckerberg came out shortly after and was just like, we're not going to censor in that way. And I think there was a bit of a pushback from that.
Yeah, I mean, Zuckerberg said, you don't want us to be the arbiter of truth, and we're not going to be the arbiter of truth. And then the argument that he made is that we're not a media company, we're a quote unquote platform, whatever that means. The reality, though, is that what a media company is in 2020 has changed. The definition has evolved. If you ask someone who is a Facebook user, the average person, do they look to Facebook to get news? Most of them would say yes. And in fact, many of them, and I've seen the statistics from Pew Research, many of them use Facebook as their primary news source.
Right.
So while Zuckerberg may say, oh, it's not a news platform, we're not a media company, the practical reality is that it is a news platform, and that the type of messaging that appears there really matters. And it matters to marketers, and it matters to our society overall.
Yeah, very much so. We have a good question from Lyndon. Looking ahead, do either of you, with your extensive knowledge as marketers, forecast the next Facebook platform?
Wow, that is a great question, and you're talking to the person who missed Twitter. When Twitter came along, I was like, this thing's ridiculous. This isn't going anywhere. So I won't pretend to be the person who predicts that, but I will say that it's always amazing the way there are new innovations constantly that displace the old ones.
Yeah.
Who thought there could be a bigger and more powerful company than Walmart? And along comes Amazon.
Right.
Who thought that MySpace would collapse in 12 months?
Right.
And it did.
Right.
So while I can't predict what the next thing will be, I can predict that there's probably going to be a next thing, and that we may be surprised by how quickly it comes along.
Yeah, I think that you make some good points. It's hard to predict which one will take hold. But from the conversations I'm having with individuals who are slowly migrating away from Facebook and some of these other platforms is that they're looking for more intentional, relationship building focused platforms. And I think that that's one of the reasons we have started shifting to this Mighty network, because we can create our own network. So it's very intentional. It's business focused. It's co-working focused. It has very focused topics and groups that you can participate in, and there's no privacy issues like there are on these other platforms. So I think people are looking for more positive experiences as well. If you're spending, and the average hours on Facebook, do you know what that is? I think it's a couple hours a day that the people are spending on some kind of social network.
Right.
If you're spending that much time of your day looking at potentially negative content, I think we're seeing a shift to something more positive.
Right. Yeah. The thing that I didn't mention when I talked about one of the reasons that I've gone away from Facebook is the kind of outrage messaging. While the sort of hate and violence messaging is a real thing, and I'm gravely concerned about that. Personally, what I saw in my network was just a tremendous amount of outrage. Facebook became the place where people would vent. Mm-hmm. And often that venting turned into arguments. Right. And while I agreed with some of the positions, I disagree with others. Just the sort of tenor of the types of messaging sort of wore me down.
Yes, yeah.
So that's one of the factors with Facebook that I think is wearing down a lot of people. The other thing that I would say to your point, Anne, you talked about sort of niche networks, and the reality is that Facebook used to be a niche network. It was a network first for college students. Then it was a network for sort of young people in the know. Mm-hmm. Then our kids got on there, and then when our kids' grandparents got on there, the kids got off. And now there's new networks emerging. TikTok. Many young people spend a lot more time on Instagram than they do on Facebook. So I think there is this migration, but Facebook has a lot of holding power because so much is there, like the groups and resources like Facebook Marketplace, mm-hmm. which is brilliant for them. Yeah.
And now they're streaming, right. And they're really focused on gaming as well, because with these Twitch, for example, which we're streaming to right now, and so on, Facebook is looking to get a part of that market. So it's what they're trying to do is take everything and smush it into one platform, right. So you never leave, right?
Yeah, I mean, at some point, Facebook, and it may have passed this point, Facebook becomes like oxygen. It becomes like it is the internet. It's the internet in miniature. Everything is there that you need. That's what they would like. Right. And when that happens, and when it becomes sort of a microcosm of our whole society, which to some degree it is, you have to ask, what type of society do you want? Do you want a place that's safe and reputable and decent, or not? Because when Zuckerberg says we're not going to be the arbiter of truth and we're going to ignore our own standards in certain areas, that's not the type of network that I want to be on.
Right. I totally agree with you. So when it comes back to bring it back to this boycott real quick, do you think this will make an impact?
I do think it will make an impact. And the reason I say that is that I think we're at kind of an inflection point in our society where there are a lot of things happening all at once. There's issues around racial justice. Of course, there's issues with the economy. There's political issues. And these are things that are sort of deeper and more intense than I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I think that seismic change that's happening is not going to spare social media platforms. It's not going to spare Facebook. Facebook is going to have to change, just like a lot of places in our society are having to change. So I think this will have a lasting effect.
And I think it's really important to start having these conversations. And that's what I'm really thankful for the Stop Hate for Profit initiative, is it's forcing us to talk about not only hate speech and misinformation, but it also makes us start reflecting more on privacy issues, how our data is being used, how, as we're coming up to an election cycle, how that's going to play a role. There's so many conversations just around this topic, and I hope that this boycott brings attention, especially to small businesses, to take a look at their marketing practices and how they can participate in this boycott. I know the Candy Factory, we do advertise on Facebook throughout the year, and we've stopped all of our advertising. We stopped prior to July 1, and I don't know if we're ever going to go back. I think we are slowly trying to migrate off of it, and that includes our advertising. And so, you can add your name, correct, as a business to the boycott list?
Right. Yeah. And one of the things that I've been thinking about in preparation for our conversation here, I've been trying to sort of get to the root of what bothers me about what's happening with Facebook as a marketing person.
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to this. I think that advertising works and has worked because there's this unspoken pact between advertisers and consumers. And that unspoken pact, it goes something like this. Advertisers say, yeah, we got to advertise. I know you don't like it and you'd rather just watch your show, or you'd rather just, watch your video on YouTube. But we got to advertise because that's how we build our business.
Right.
And we're going to do it in a way that's relevant and meaningful and isn't dishonest. We're going to try to make it entertaining, and we're going to put it in decent content. And on the consumer side, their end of the pact is, hey, we don't like advertising. No one does. We don't like watching it. We'd rather just watch our shows. Yeah. But we get it. You guys have to advertise. That's how businesses grow. But as long as you don't try to trick me, as long as you treat me well, that I'll go along with it. And that's the pact that has always existed between advertisers and consumers. And but there are things that could destroy that. So if advertising messages are lies, if consumers feel they're getting tricked or manipulated, if the content where advertising is placed is terrible or violent or hateful, that pact will unravel. And when I look at the trajectory that Facebook is on, I think it's headed in that direction. Yeah. And that's not going to be good for marketers. It's not going to be good for consumers. It's not going to be good for our society. And so now is the time to address that. Now is the time for marketers to say, do I want to be part of this? Maybe I need to demand that this platform changes its practices. And I think that's what's happening with the boycott.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. And on top of that, what about your brand? You had talked about this being in the same position as some of this hate speech, right? So you can't control that.
Correct. And when you do campaigns on Facebook and you allow the algorithm to do the targeting for you, which is part of the reason why Facebook advertising is so effective, it's going to embed your ads in places that you aren't aware of. And it's going to embed your ads in content that likely you're not going to be that comfortable with. And there's no way to audit that. So with a TV ad, you're able to audit where it appeared. And if you don't like it as a marketer, you can make an argument to the TV network that you want to make good. That doesn't happen with Facebook. That practice isn't in place. And so if we believe that the medium is the message, and I think for marketers to some degree it is, that the place where you put your advertising reflects on your brand, not just the message itself. If you care about that, and I think marketers should, then they should take a close look at what's happening with Facebook.
One final comment here from Chris. However unlikely, I'm hoping that in 2021, the U.S. government will designate Facebook and Twitter, et cetera, as public utilities, and that will be the next set of platforms. That's a really interesting point, and I haven't read that much about that. Chris, you know anything?
Well, I've heard that said. I think that I like the idea of that, and I think that there's something really interesting behind that. Because sort of like we were talking about before, they have become so vital.
Sure.
They have become so nested into our everyday lives that what happens on those platforms has a big impact on our daily lives. So I think that's where that argument comes from. Whether our government could sort of get its act together to do something like that, and whether it should, I think that's another question. But that sentiment behind that is very interesting.
Yeah, and Chris, I'd love for you to share more information with us if you have. Either put it in the comments or send it over to me, and I'd love to add that to our notes as well if you have any information on social networks as public utility. So very good point. And Joel has said, is there an issue with Facebook as a public company having to grow its ad revenue, therefore making it more expensive over time for advertisers to reach the same number of people? I've noticed, that's a really good point, Joel, is that I've noticed just the expense to reach one or two people. It used to be you could reach hundreds for $10, $20, and we would keep an eye on an ad and we would just kind of build upon it as we would go, as it would take hold. Now that $10 or $20 gets you 50 potential eyeballs on there. So how has that shifted and changed?
I honestly don't know how that shifted and changed. What I have noticed, sort of in contrast to that, is that as teams of people that I've worked with have gotten better at using Facebook, they've been able to actually make it work better, so you get better results for your dollar. But there's an interesting factor there, and that relates to the idea that as there is more skepticism about Facebook, as there is more concern about the content, as groups of people start to leave, as younger people have already started to leave, it is going to get harder to reach your audience. And also, if there are new restrictions on the type of data that can be used for targeting, if there's more restrictions on what data can be used for targeting, it will get harder to reach your audience, and it probably will get more expensive.
For sure. Well, any other final comments from those that are watching, or questions for John? And while we're waiting for that, John, any final thoughts from you about where does Facebook go from here, and what should we keep an eye out for?
Sure. Well, I think that marketers and folks that I work with, what I would encourage them to do is have this type of conversation and ask themselves, how does it reflect on our brand where we advertise? Not just what we advertise, but where we advertise, and make sure that there's a comfort level, and that it's in line with your brand and it's in line with your values. So I would ask marketers to think about that. In terms of where Facebook goes, they just have not been true to their values. I'm not sure they've even had values that the public would agree with at this point. I think they're going to really have to get more transparent and more accountable. I think that this idea of walking this line where, yeah, sure, we'll do anything as long as it's financially viable. I think that's not going to work for them in the long term, and they're going to have to take a position and be true to whatever kinds of values and transparency they commit to.
Sure. It's very good points. Well, John, this was incredibly helpful. I think as we're all paying attention to what's happening with the boycott, what's happening with Facebook in general, how they're changing their policies. I know that they've already made some changes this past week. Your insight and knowledge is greatly appreciated as we're all keeping an eye on this.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. I hope this leads to other conversations, and I hope that our marketing and advertising friends are having these conversations as well.
And we'll have to circle back at the end of July, maybe,
sure,
and see how effective the campaign has been and what changes have been made, if any. So, John, if someone wanted to reach out to you, how can we find you?
Sure. Please visit my website, J Walker Marketing. The URL is jwalkermktg.com, J Walker Marketing. And I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to continue this conversation.
Right. And you can be found on LinkedIn?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
But not on Facebook.
No. Well, maybe they'll change things and maybe you'll come back.
Maybe.
Who knows? Well, I'm exiting for sure. Well, I want to thank everyone who's watched. Great questions and comments. We really appreciate it. And thank you again, John. And I look forward to continuing the conversation and circling back in a couple weeks and seeing where we're at.
Very good. Thanks, Ann.
Thanks. I hope everyone has a fantastic day. Thanks, John.